Tonight on Nightline, top of the world, a group of teenagers journey up a magic mountain in search of remarkable ruins. But many face another challenge. They're blind. Will they complete their incredible journey?
From the global resources of ABC News, with Terry Moran, Martin Bashir, and Cynthia McFadden from Times Square, New York, this is Nightline, July 12, 2006.
Well, now let's take a remarkable journey to one of the most beautiful and mysterious corners of the world. Machu Picchu in South America is known as the lost city of the Incas. It's lodged high in a forbidding mountain range, and since its discovery nearly 100 years ago, travelers have gone to great lengths to behold it. But the group we'll meet tonight aren't trying to see this ancient marvel. They have an even greater vision. Here's Nightline's John Donvan.
Can you call it sightseeing when, because you're blind, you can't actually see the sights? Can you call it trekking when, because you're blind, you might not even know where to put your foot down next?
Plus, if you do stumble, you'll have your poles to catch you.
High in the mountains of southern Peru, where hikers almost never see other outsiders, 18 American teenagers set out last month for a place called Machu Picchu, a long-gone civilization that was the gem of the Incan Empire. And yes, several of these young people are blind. And whether you can call this sightseeing, that depends on what you mean by seeing.
I think a trek like this is such a great adventure where it makes you think big about life and about your future.
Erik Weihenmayer is the group's leader and knows all too well that there should be no limits on the blind because he is blind himself.
What?
5 years ago, he became the first and only blind person to reach the top of Mount Everest.
Thank you.
Good job, buddy. You did it.
A one-time teacher, he's now a part-time climber and full-time motivational speaker.
You gotta jump. Okay. Okay, jump. All right, good.
Not bad for a kid who came to this very spot in Peru as a teenager 20 years ago and had basically a terrible time of it. His mom had just died. His dad, who led the trek, thought that Erik needed a challenge.
When I was 17 years old, this was the first sort of multi-day camping trip I ever did, the Inca Trail into Machu Picchu. And about 3 or 4 times a day, I would trip over a rock and go tumbling off the side of the trail. My dad would be trying to grab me and bouncing along behind me, trying to catch me. And I hated hiking. It was miserable. I mean, it was so hard, tripping and stumbling.
But he kept at it and discovered that surviving out here and surviving as a blind person, they take a lot of the same skills.
And you have to bring that uncontrollable environment under control. And you do it with your skill, with the systems that you create, and with the team that you build around you. And if you can master that, I think you can master almost anything.
I'm feeling this ridge here, guys, and I've just come to the next hook.
And so I think the outdoors is a great place to enable kids to face that adversity.
And so Erik, for the first time, is taking a group of American teenagers to experience what he experienced.
I usually put my foot there to brace it.
Not all of the 18 kids are blind. 5 are. 4 have serious visual impairments. The rest are acting as guides. They can see.
When you're blind especially, you're going to have to learn to work with sighted people. And it's not about functioning with other blind people. It's about living in a sighted world. So to bring blind and sighted kids together, helping each other, and each of them asserting a sense of leadership, I mean, I think that's very important.
All 18 are here to learn about Peru and about each other and about themselves.
This is a once-in-a-lifetime trip because not everybody gets the chance, to lead a blind person up one of the toughest trails in Peru. And so I think it'll definitely have an impact on me, mentally, spiritually, and physically.
It's 10 days in Peru, but the first 3 days are essentially practice because even here on the relatively flat terrain, it is not easy.
What should I do when I plant these poles?
It's feeling your way along the path.
I just did. Pop. Yeah. Pop. You know where it is. It rests on top. Now you know your next step.
It is also hearing your way along the path. Most of these kids They're already well up there on the achievement scale, a lot of straight-A students and musicians and athletes among them.
I've been training for a long time, mainly cycling and climbing stairs. So to actually have a first burst in this high altitude, and I feel like I'm very confident using my poles and following my guide.
And so, on a Tuesday morning, they finally set off for real. A trek that Erik designed to be much higher and more difficult and even more dangerous than those most tourists would attempt. Some, like Paul, found it a struggle early on.
A little lightheaded now.
You want to put your head between your legs? That helps sometimes.
I feel kind of bummed because I feel like I'm slowing everyone else up, or that I'm maybe not so good. It's hard.
Terry also had difficulty.
So it's a little swollen out here where you said you were hurting at first. So remember we were talking about that lateral ligament?
I was really worried, actually, that I might have to ride a horse, and I want to hike the whole way to Machu Picchu. Because that's the ultimate goal of everybody.
That first day, though, despite the real difficulties, Paul and Terry and the rest covered 6 miles and then reached their first campsite, and there was sleep. The next morning, and they were now in a place called Chilapaua. And Erik had set this day up as a chance for the Americans actually to touch the local Peruvian culture.
We want to challenge them, just as we want to challenge all of our students. All of our projects, we always consult the community and we ask them what they need.
This is a poor mountain village, maybe half a dozen houses here, and a single school, attended by kids who have had to walk in for hours from the surrounding mountains. And the place needed a paint job.
I've never really painted a building before.
It was exhilarating for the Americans to be so in the middle of nowhere and yet in the middle of everything.
You're right.
But the next day it was back to the trail, which is now getting even harder. The thinning air brings on altitude sickness.
I know that if I'm starting to breathe a little hard, you're probably not feeling very good at all. What's your heart doing?
Beating pretty fast.
Yes. Doesn't feel like it's going to explode out of your chest or anything, does it?
Feels like there's a little pressure, but no exploding.
Okay.
Altitude gain isn't picky when it comes to being blind or not. You know, it affects everybody in the same way. If altitude wants you and you don't take the appropriate measures, then it'll get you.
I bet you some of them are internally feeling very inadequate right now, and that's okay. That's a good feeling, because sometimes when you feel that sort of feeling in your gut, like, you know, I can do more. I'm not sure how, but I know I can do more. That's a good thing. It's a good motivator.
And yet they keep going through a third day.
My defiance comes from the idea that it is so ridiculous to limit people based on their vision.
Right in front of that one. Right there, yeah.
And it's very irritating when people impose limitations on you.
Good job, guys. Welcome.
And then through a fourth day.
Both of my parents grew up in the mountains, so with them giving me the independence, then, you know, that makes me more of who I am. Whereas if they were to just, you know, say, oh, he's got a disability or something, we got to baby him all the time, you know, I think I would be, you know, just, I guess more like a wuss.
And a fifth day. And remember, 4 members of this group still have some vision, but they're slowly going blind.
My vision's been stable for as long as I can remember now, and when we asked the doctors if I could go blind, they say, I don't know, maybe I could. We'll have to see and find out.
I just slid down the mountain.
And never once let on that there were things they literally couldn't see on the trail.
These kids are in sort of that no man's land where they're not blind, but they're not sighted. They're sort of in a world in between. And so they desperately want to be like the sighted kids. They don't want to be seen as being blind. That's their greatest fear still.
And as they camp on that 5th night, their goal, the ancient civilization of Machu Picchu, lies just ahead.
We did it, y'all. Machu Picchu, like straight ahead of us.
They reach it finally.
It's awesome.
Late the next day, and they are triumphant. And if anyone doubts whether you can call this sightseeing,
And at the top of that, there's even more ruins. And it's
well, just look at this. I'm John Donvan for Nightline.
What a great achievement. And